And everyone, it looks like that should be here. I call this meeting to order at 6 p.m. Board Clerk, will you call the roll, please?
Absolutely. Good evening, everyone. I will begin with Director Gould,
Present.
Orzali,
Here.
Wood,
Here.
Sheets, here, Kelly,
Present.
Jones,
Here.
White,
Here.
Clark,
Present.
and Director Sailors, turning it over to you.
Thank you very much. Now we will say the pledge to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic
In which it stands, one nation,
liberty and justice for all. Thank you. The Metro Cable announcement. The open session meeting is videotaped for cablecast on Metro Cable 14. Replay on Sunday, June 12th at 3 p.m. and Monday, June 13th at 12 noon on Channel 14. Webcast at metro14live.saccounty.net. Can everyone hear me in the back there? Good job. We have removed action item number 4 tonight from the action items. We now have public opportunity to discuss matters of public interest within this district jurisdiction, including items on or not on the agenda. Madam Clerk, do we have any speakers tonight?
I have no speakers in person, and Art, if you could unmute everyone. Just unmuting everyone, giving them a moment.
Hello, attendees. You now have the ability to unmute yourself if there's anything you would like to present to the board at this time. Looks like no takers.
Thank you. Having no speakers, we now move on to the consent items. Do we have any questions? If we don't, can I get a motion in a second, please?
I so move. I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Madam Clerk, will you call the roll, please?
Director Gould,
Aye.
Orzali,
Aye.
Wood,
Aye.
Sheets, aye, Kelly,
Aye.
Jones,
Aye.
White,
Aye.
Clark,
Aye.
and Sailors.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Moving on to action items. The first action item is the fiscal year 2022-23 preliminary budget. CFO Dave O'Toole. What do you have for us tonight?
Good evening. I have a preliminary budget for you.
Thank
you, Madam Chair and board members, Chief Harms. Before I get started, Chief Harms would like to make a few remarks.
Sure. Thank you, Dave. Good evening, directors. Tonight we have 2 of the action items that I'll talk about. One is the preliminary budget for fiscal year 22-23, and then the capital improvement program, which is kind of new, but not new. It's what we have done, but we have taken and put a lot of work in it over the last few years for being able to move that forward in a more consistent manner. A number of items in the 22-23 budget. I want to first compliment Dave and his team, and that everybody that has worked on the preliminary budget coming forward. This is truly Dave's now his budget that he gets to go through and manage, and he had, from his experience, a lot of input on the processes that we use to be able to get to where we're at today. We are below budget starting off the year, which I think is a good position to be in. We were able to take some funding and put it back into what we would say is reserves that we had borrowed out of this year's budget to make sure that we were in a position not to go over budget. So a couple of good things there. One of the other items that is in there that we've looked at, and especially over the last couple of years, is that there is a couple of new positions that are in the budget and some upgrades. And as we went through and we looked at the workload in some of the different areas, and an example of that is the training has a new captain that will go in at mid-year, and then there's a captain's position that is in the helicopter program that would start in mid-year, and a CQI manager that is back in there. So again, looking at workload, looking at where we're at as a district, and then looking at that 5-year plan as we move forward, those things are in there. On the other presentation, which is the capital improvement program, both Dave and Jeff Fry and Aaron really over the last year or so had looked at our program and then said, how can we take what we do and what we've done in the past, but how can we make it more transparent? How do we look at all the different items, list all the different items, and really be able to bring that forward to the fire chief and the exec staff for moving forward. So I'm very happy with both the initial preliminary budget that we're bringing forward, and then really happy with what we have done with the capital improvement program that will be presented second to you all. So Dave, why don't you take it away?
Thank you. Okay, so for tonight, here's for the preliminary budget briefing agenda. We've got these 8 items. A good place to start would be kind of revisiting where we are today. That's the mid-year. So we'll go back to the, we'll start with an update on the mid-year budget. Then we'll move on to an overview of the preliminary budget, and then drill down to the general fund revenues, expenditures, and then the other funds involved, fund conditions. This presentation includes a long-term forecast. We'll be looking 5 years out as well. And quick tie into the CIP. Of course, the CIP is a separate agenda item, so we'll go into that more deeply then, and then of course time for questions. So beginning with the current year budget, with the actions you took on March 10th, the 12.4 million general fund shortfall was corrected and remains corrected. The shortfall had a number of causes, but to pick just 3 that stood out would be 3 million in ground emergency medical transport revenues that were deferred to 22-23, which incidentally I'll talk more later, but we have more assurances on the timing of that, and that is built into the budget now. And 8.6 million in extra constant staffing costs, which are the suppression overtime costs for a position that's unable to serve their shift, and 2.8 million in increased services and supplies. Also worth mentioning that the COVID funding tap, if you will, did not flourish for us. We received just 900,000 in COVID after the final budget was adopted in September, which didn't help us as we were trying to close that budget gap. It's also important to note that the change in the IGT program, where a delay by the state and federal program administrators pushed the program funding out into the next year. So we did not have $8 million available when we were balancing the mid-year budget that we might otherwise have had. And that was part of the reason why we did have to make transfers from other funds. The most important update of all is that the solutions appear to be working. As I said, funds available and income is holding above expenditures for this fiscal year. And so with that, we'll move on to the preliminary budget overview. The 2022-23 preliminary budget has essentially balanced for the general fund, with budgeted expenditures and transfers roughly equal to expected revenues and transfers in. The 2.1 million transferred from the general fund to close the mid-year shortfall, as mentioned, will be repaid. We anticipate 6.6% projected property tax growth, which equates to about 11.6 million in increase over the current year budget as we passed in the mid-year. Medic cost recovery is projected to grow by 1.4 million, and IGT will continue for another year and generate a net 8.7 million. All labor costs are projected to grow by just shy of 1 million, which there's a lot going on underneath that figure, which I'll get to in a later slide. The preliminary budget does not reflect any changes to the terms of the district's current labor agreements, which expire in December 31. And finally, the projected year-end reserve is 13%, which is up from the 12.5% we had after the mid-year adjustments, but of course below the 15% we typically target and strive for. We'll revisit the reserve level again when we do the final budget in August and September. Looking at general fund revenue, a familiar slide to all of you. This is 10 consecutive years of property tax growth and the 12th consecutive year of total revenue growth. Property tax revenues as a share of general fund revenues has declined by about 5% since 2010-11, and you can see that. You can see how the blue is expanding, so our other revenues are making a larger share of it. That includes a lot of that is EMS revenues and IGT transfers. Total projected general fund revenues in the budget year will be 255 million, which is 6.2% higher than the current year. And looking at some numbers, these are on page 22 of your preliminary budget if you have it handy. This provides kind of the biggest picture of the proposed budget. Each of the revenues is listed, or the funds is listed at the top, and then your revenues, expenditures, and other financing on the left side of the page there. And the first column of numbers is the general fund. There's that 255 million in total revenues I just mentioned. And circle below that, the expenditures, 256 million. And all the way down at the bottom is the change in fund balance, which you get in by, which you get to by adding the net total transfers, net transfers, which is 3.7 million positive. So you end up with a change in fund balance of just under 2.2 million. There's that 2.17 I mentioned. In the capital facilities fund, you see expenditures of almost 12.7 million. That's the next fund over, and which are covered by lease financing, the sale of an asset, a former fire station property, and 5 million transfer from the general fund for a net balance of 316,000. We'll talk more about the funds in later detail, but if you go all the way to the right on that slide, their total revenues are 276 million for all funds, and expenditures 280.9, almost 281. And the last circled at the bottom right is your balance of all funds of 3.3 million. Next, we are going on to mid-year and preliminary. So this table is comparing the mid-year and preliminary with the variance at the right. So all general fund. Starting with property taxes, the row circled at the top of the long oval, expected tax revenues in 22-23 are 187.3 million. That's an 11.6 million or 6.6% increase I mentioned previously. Look at the next oval down where you have your adding revenue sources altogether, like charges for services provided, including medic fees. Total revenues will climb 67 million to 254 million. The proposed budget reflects a modest increase in labor costs, just 1 million, as I said before. But underneath that is 4.9 million increase in wages associated with most recent labor agreements, and 4.8 million increase in CalPERS pension costs. And those two costs are substantially offset by things like the return to a more of a historical average of constant staffing. We're anticipating that going down substantially by what, 7.6 million. And as a reference point, the labor costs in 22-23 will actually be 18.5 million greater than they were 2 years ago. So the 1 million is kind of is an adjusted, going up 1 year from the current year seems pretty modest. But if you take another year look, you can see that labor costs are still growing substantially over a longer term. With services and supplies, they're rising by 2.2 million, which I'll talk about on a later slide. And the total expenditures is increased by 3.2 million. Factoring in transfers, the balance circled again is 2.2 million, which is a positive swing of 4.2 million from the mid-year. Here's a table, just briefly shows the makeup of general fund revenues. Taxes and charges for services make up 94.6% of revenues. That 8.7 million operating transfer is the IGT transfer. And let's see, the intergovernmental transfers of 4.3 million includes RDA residual distributions and pass-throughs, as well as homeowner property tax revenues. More on general fund revenues. As mentioned, the district expects to get a 6.6% increase in property tax revenue. Medic cost transport revenues are reverting to closer to pre-pandemic levels, about 2% a year. And the good news on the GMT, which is the program where we receive partial state reimbursement for medic transports of Medi-Cal beneficiaries. Recently, the state department that administers the program shared that we would begin to receive payments for the last 3 years, starting this fall. That's 2018-19 through 2020-21. And then we expect to also receive the 21-22 funding, although that's not built into the budget because we haven't quite figured out the timing yet. But of course, we'll be back with the final to resolve that in the final budget. And net IGT revenues are down slightly from last year, about 700,000 at 8.7 million. And the State Department of Healthcare Services advises us to expect changes to that program this year. So we're kind of getting through those, but the reduction is based on an anticipated lower involvement by managed care plans. This next slide, now we're going from revenues to expenditures and still staying with the general fund. Labor costs are still a big part of Metro Fire's budget, 82.2%, and service and supplies just 14.1%. Going over to labor costs, as mentioned earlier, it's a $214 million labor budget, up 1 million compared to the mid-year and 18.5 million higher than 2020-21. With the labor budget, wages within that labor budget will grow by 7.4%, which reflects things like the 4% negotiated wage increase, new positions, and natural wage growth through things like promotions. Pension contributions will tick up by 4.8 million. And if you recall that the windfall market returns that PERS enjoyed, they take 2 years to be phased in, so we won't see those till next year. Medical premiums will rise 6.9% or 1.1 million. Let's see, constant staffing will go down by 7.6 million. PERS OPEB contributions, unlike those pension contributions I just mentioned, those are phased in after 1 year. The market changes are phased in after 1 year instead of 2. So we'll actually see a $2.2 million decrease in our OPEB contributions this year. So we have some savings there. And then reflecting the decline in COVID cases, we expect workers' comp claims to subside down to savings of 770,000. Service and supplies budget, 36.8 million, just 2.2 million over what was approved in the mid-year budget. Liability insurance premiums are rising again by about 746,000. Education and training is going up mainly because we're expecting staff to catch up on some of those trainings that were deferred during the pandemic. And there's some inflationary and supply chain pressures sprinkled through the service and supplies budgets too. Vehicle maintenance is going up by 231,000, computer services by 142,000. Moment on debt service assessments and contributions. We'll pay the county 1.9 million for property tax administration this year. We actually a little preview of what's to come. We expect that number to go up substantially as they are phasing in a new property tax IT system. We'll have more to report on that probably in September. We'll also make a $1.9 million payment to the state for the GEMT QAF program, an expense that gets offset by Medicare reimbursements through EMS. And the general fund debt service payments on lease revenue bonds total 259,000, reflecting a savings of 53,000, mainly due to the recently executed lease revenue bond refinancing. Going to general fund transfers, very briefly, there's a $5 million transfer to the capital facilities fund, and it's offset by an 8.7 million transfer from the IGT fund. The IGT fund is really, practically speaking, is more of a short-term placeholder for transfers to the general fund. It's not really a surplus fund. All right, moving on to other funds, capital facilities fund. Really have little, if any, revenues generated here. The major expenditure here is the lease revenue bond retirement in 21-22, which is reflected as a special item offset, negative 8.1 million, circled at the bottom of the second column there. 7.4 million of the 7.5 million in capital outlay is expected to be financed, with the difference already having been financed in the prior year. The remaining capital expenditures and debt service payments are funded with a $5 million transfer from the general fund, as previously mentioned. And so what is that 7.5 million getting spent on? On page 28 of your preliminary budget, it has all of the items in detail, but probably the three main ones that you notice right away are 5 Type 1 engines at 4.2 million, 9 ambulances at 2.4 million, and the copter conversion 750,000. Moving on to the grant fund, just briefly, 21-22 was an extraordinary year for grants, and kind of we're budgeting for grants to come back to earth, if you will. Total grant revenue is expected to shrink by 1.5 million, and expenditures on the grant side will decrease by 1.6 million. Factoring in transfers, the expected balance is 555,000. On the leased properties funds, lease revenues are expected at approximately 1.1 million for the budget year, and about the same as last year. And expenditures are expected to drop by about 571,000, with leaving a projected balance of 488,000, which constitutes a partial payback of the 1.2 million that was transferred in the mid-year budget. In the long-term forecast, so this is not in your budget, the long-term forecast, but it's presented here as information to look ahead and kind of what to expect. So I'm going to talk for a minute about the assumptions in there. This is the budget year plus 5 years. So we go all the way out to 27, 28. Some of the important assumptions that were used in the forecast were on the revenue side. We used property tax consultants, our property tax consultants numbers through 26, 27, and then extended them out an additional year based on their trend data. IGT did not include any change in IGT, just held it flat at 8.7 through the forecast period. Last year, we treated it the same way. We just held it flat. Expenditures, we assumed a 1% growth, 1% increase in salaries. Last year, we didn't increase any at all. I thought we should just add some in. And then we recall that labor costs are 82.2% of the budget and wages alone are 28% of that budget. So the projection can look very different as you layer on percentages and wages, as you might imagine. Pension cost share between employer and employee doesn't change. It's the same as last year. Didn't change the shares there. Let's see, inflation did change. Last year, we're using just 2% through the entire growth period. This time we're using 7.3% in 22-23, which is based on Federal Bureau of Labor Statistics numbers, and then stepping that down 7.3 to 6.3 annually through the rest of the forecast, 1% a year until it gets down to 2%. The borrowing rate also needed to adjust that quite a bit too. It was at 2% last year. Now we are increased it to 4.5% in 22-23 and 23-24, and then gradually stepping it down by about a half point as we anticipate that some of the Fed actions will bring more control into the market will happen. We'll see more. We'll see rates come down, but in a few years. Yeah, and the bond rates climbed to 3.1% in early May. We expect at least 2 more 0.5% increases planned by the Fed. So that's how we came up with those projections. So with those assumptions, let's take a look at the charts. The first forecast chart shows a revenues expenditures overview starting in 15-16 and going all the way out to 27-28. The green bar is revenues, the red bar is expenditures. Notice in the middle, the first circle, that's the current year, 21-22. And you can see that the red bar is slightly above, and that reflects what happened in the mid-year, and that we made a transfer from the general fund to make that align. We had to make a transfer to the general fund to make that align. And then next year, our budget year, also circled, shows the reverse. Revenues are again exceeding expenditures and following that trend through the forecast period with a widening gap. The widening gap between revenues and expenditures is helped by an assumption of strong property tax growth, about 4% going out after this 6.6% year. And if the course of that growth reverses, something that happens in the economy, it starts to look very different quickly. On the revenue side, this is a general fund revenues and transfers in slide. It shows the data starting in 2014-15 again. The dark blue vertical bars are property taxes, still climbing up as mentioned. And the green bars are charges for services, growing more modestly than property taxes, but still about 2% on those. So going over to the expenditure forecast for general fund. This slide shows the expenses over the same period as the revenue chart we just saw. Notice that wages, which are in red, are slow growing in the forecast period, while the cost of benefits in blues continues to expand. Pension obligation bonds, this is an important one to see because you can see at the right, in 25-26, you've got your last payments, and then 26-27, there is no pension bond payments to make, which will be important in the next slide. To right there. This is your forecast of general fund reserves. So the green line is 15%, which you can read all the way over on the right. So it's your bar to if you're tracking 15% as our target. And then red is historically where we've been. So we were under it for a while. We got up to it and then dipped back down in 21-22 and expect it to climb out. That first circle is the 12.5%. The second circle is the 13% we currently have built into our preliminary budget. If the forecast holds, the 15% is nearly required in 24-25, and then climbs out from there pretty substantially. If you're probably wondering why is that, a big part of that would be the POB payments going away, And not having that commitment on our budget would enable us to accrue a pretty a healthy reserve rather quickly. So a comment on the CIP, I just want to mention that the CIP, everything we're going to discuss in the CIP is integrated into the preliminary budget, so the numbers tie, and that's the way it was designed. So before questions, let's see, the budget for 22-23 as well as projections for future years will continue to be refined as more information is known. Of course, we expect to come back with the final budget to the Finance and Audit Committee in August, and then all of you in September. This is an action item for the board, and staff's recommendation is to adopt the 6 resolutions necessary to implement the 22-23 budget, preliminary budget. But before those questions, I just want to mention a couple of things. In the document itself, the budget narratives and the divisional budget narratives have been substantially revamped to include not only the division descriptions, but also performance measures and goals, which is consistent with the direction you gave in the strategic plan. You wanted to see more of that integrated into our budgeting. So we're happy to add that in. I got great help from all the division budget officers across the district in putting those together, as well as the finance team. And with that, the finance team specifically would like to recognize Ron Ampedrad and Tara Mailer and Sarah Ortiz and the rest of the finance team who put together and worked on the budget. So with that concludes my remarks, and welcome your questions.
Do I have any comments or questions from any directors?
Just one.
Go ahead.
And first, thank you for you and your team for the work that went into putting into the preliminary budget, a lot of moving parts. One of the things that you had mentioned was lower involvement in the managed care plans. So is that essentially going to affect the headroom that's available in the IGT fund?
So we had been anticipating about 9.4 million annual on a straight line basis. And the plans that are, it hasn't happened yet, but we use a firm that helps us forecast this. They anticipated that the reduction of 1 or 2 of the plans would result in about a $700,000 decrease. That's something that we'll want to update you on in August and September too, because that program is kind of evolving
Constantly in flux. It just seems like it's changed almost every year at some facet of the system. And then the 8 million originally, that was the money for our non-federal match for the IGT funds. Is that correct? Or is that, what was our non-federal share?
The amount that I don't know, make sure I'm thinking of the right 8 million in IGT funds.
Well, you'd mentioned 8 million in the IGT, but that we didn't have that at the time. Was that for our, that we have to put up the non-federal match?
Oh, that was net up. So we had put up our share of the match, and then the program was.
I thought that sounded like a large share for.
It was,
non-federal
yeah.
match.
We would have had 8 million more in the IGT fund in March had that not happened.
All right, thanks. That's all my questions.
Does anyone else have any questions or comments? All right, so this is an action item, so I will take a motion in a second on the first resolution, number A.
Madam Chair, I make a motion that we adopt staff's recommendation for fiscal year 2022-23 preliminary budget. Resolution A, preliminary budget for the general operating funds 212A.
Also,
Thank you. I have a motion and a second. Madam Clerk, will you call the roll, please?
Director Gould,
Aye.
Barzali,
Aye.
Wood,
aye.
Sheets,
Aye.
Kelly,
Aye.
Jones. Aye. White,
Aye.
Clark,
Aye.
and Sailors.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. For the next item, B, can I get a motion in a second, please?
Yeah, what did you guys take? I make a motion that we adopt fiscal year 2022 preliminary budget, resolution B, preliminary budget for the capital facilities fund 212D.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Madam Clerk, will you call the roll, please?
Director Gould,
Aye.
Barzali,
Aye.
Wood,
Aye.
Sheets,
Aye.
Kelly,
Aye.
Jones,
Aye.
White,
Aye.
Clark,
Aye.
and Sailors.
Aye.
Madam Chair, I make a motion that we adopt fiscal year 2022-23 preliminary budget resolution C, grants fund 212G.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Will you call the roll, please?
Director Gould,
Aye.
Orzali,
Aye.
Wood,
Aye.
Sheets,
Aye.
Kelly,
Aye.
Jones,
Aye.
White,
Aye.
Clark,
Aye.
and Sailors.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Madam Chair, I make a motion that we adopt fiscal year 2022 preliminary budget resolution D for the development impact fee fund 212I.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Will you call the roll, please?
Director Gould,
Aye.
Orzali,
Aye.
Wood,
Aye.
Sheets,
Aye.
Kelly. Did I hear you, Director Kelly?
I didn't hear you.
Oh, sorry. Kelly, gotcha. Jones.
Aye.
White.
Aye.
Clark
Aye.
and Sailors.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Madam Chair, I make a recommendation that we adopt the recommendation for the fiscal year 2022 preliminary budget resolution E for the leased properties fund 212L.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Will you call the roll, please?
Director Gould,
Aye.
Orzali,
Aye.
Wood,
Aye.
Sheets,
Aye.
Kelly,
Aye.
Jones,
Aye.
White,
Aye.
Clark,
Aye.
and Sailors.
Aye.
Motion passes.
All right, lastly, I make a motion that we adopt the recommendation for the fiscal year 2022 preliminary budget resolution F for the ITT fund 212M.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Will you call the roll, please?
Director Gould,
Aye.
Orzali,
Aye.
Wood,
Aye.
Sheets,
Aye.
Kelly,
Aye.
Jones,
Aye.
White,
Aye.
Clark,
Aye.
and Sailors.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. The next action item is number 2, capital improvement program plan. CFO Dave O'Toole.
Good evening again, Madam Chair, board members, Marquis Farms. I am presenting this item with Jeff Fryer, Chief Development Officer. And before I begin, actually, I will just jump right in. On February 24th, you gave final approval to the capital improvement program policy and directing the process and timing for establishing the district's first modern day capital improvement program, or CIP. Tonight, we're pleased to be able to present you the results of that direction, 22-23 CIP plan. In accordance with that policy, staff followed a deliberative process to solicit and gather projects, which you'll hear about momentarily from Jeff. That process included everything, evaluating the merits of and comparing the merits of projects, prioritizing projects, aligning those priorities with funds available over the 5-year period, and discussing up to the ranks of the district. In terms of our briefing agenda, 6 items here. We want to talk, Jeff will address the CIP nexus with the district strategic plan and other planning documents of the CIP. Roles and responsibilities in the CIP process. Jeff will cover that. I'll provide a short overview of the 22-23 CIP document. Jeff will cover the project selection process and selections. And finally, I'll discuss the financing plan. With that, I'll turn it over to Jeff.
Thanks, Dave. So I just want to take a second here and tell the board a little bit about the why behind the CIP, why we did this, and the nexus between the 2020 strategic plan. And I'll remind you of the end of 2019 discussions with the board in the workshop, where you had identified what I call 5 elements of the strategic plan, and specifically 2 of them were called capital assets and financial management. So in my mind, this CIP and the way we set it up is in direct response to that request and desired outcome from the board. Specifically in regard to capital assets, you asked us to create 3 categories: real property, vehicle apparatus, professional equipment. And the desired outcome from the board was a comprehensive analysis for maintenance, repair, and replacement. And secondarily, within the financial management element, one of the outcomes or categories was called future projections. And again, the desired outcome was the addition of multiple year projections and impact analysis for key annual budget elements. The idea was we were presenting you 1 year pieces specifically requested with assets. This now includes a component that looks out 5 years and just gives you a little more information when the board is making those type of decisions. So the CIP is really the integration and the connection of those two strategic planning elements, and is how the entire program is set up moving forward. Give me the next slide there. So I do, since this is effectively a new process, and I do want to walk the board through how we see it working. Again, everything now is through the lens of what I call master planning documents. We want to look at our service delivery model, and we want to look at that through the lens of these 4 areas: real property, apparatus, equipment, and then just some projects just aren't going to fit well into those 3 categories. So we do have this miscellaneous category where we can introduce specialized type projects to the board. And so, that will be a part of the consideration. Since 2019-ish, I have been hard at work in organizing all of these master plans. They really look at, again, service through a long range, with some of these plans range from 5 to 40 years. So we want to be able to take all that information, digest it, and then present it really in 2 categories. One category is a 1-year plan that the board can consider as a part of the budget, and then a 5-year outlook to think about what is coming down the line. So the second part of this process is really intended for anybody to submit a project. The name of this is a project initiation form, or called PIF for short. And our intent is to allow anyone that has a look at how our service delivery should work moving forward, and a project associated, a capital project associated with that, should be able to submit a project and have the district consider it. With that PIF, we are asking for backup documentation related to costs, procedures, policies, how it's going to work, timing of acquisitions, and so forth. All of that information has been provided to you in the PIF forms in the back of the CIP. We then take those PIFs and put them into a 1- and 5-year plan, which is also included in the CIP. That body of work is brand new, and it is a lot of work. I just want to make that clear. So what we have done is we have asked Aaron Castleberry to take on that work. It is very similar to our grant application and the way it has to be managed and in the process itself. So we think it's a nice tie there. So Aaron put together those PIFs, put the 1- and 5-year plan, and that was the package that we submitted to finance, which was in what you saw tonight in the 1-year plan. Again, we also do have that 5-year outlook. That CIP is then collected as a matter of projects, and we take it to a CIP committee for review, which includes the Deputy Chief of Support Services, Finance, Planning and Development, Fleet, and Purchasing. What we recognized very early is the need for a project was going to far outweigh the available funds to complete those projects. So we wanted everybody that had a major role or responsibility in this process to weigh in that prioritization. So we effectively, in this time, I think we had about 40 projects. We sat down and tried to do an initial sort on them and then send that recommendation to the executive staff, which was the fire chief and the deputy chiefs for review and ultimately approval, recognizing that there may be other reasons to switch a couple of programs or projects around and include them. The one I used for the Finance and Audit Committee was the Copter 3 conversion in this go around. And ultimately, that process is what the board saw tonight and is seeing tonight, and it's for your consideration.
So this is the capital improvement program cover there. And the CIP, I just want to mention, was built in accordance with following guidelines from the California Society of Municipal Finance Officers and generally accepted accounting principles. The costs presented in the plan are tied to, related to the 22-23 preliminary budget, as I mentioned earlier. The plan total is 9.1 million. The sections are: the introduction has the organizational profile, including the directory of officials, district-wide organizational chart, district profile, values and mission. The CIP overview and summary section provides the purpose and background of the CIP, explains the CIP planning and development process like Jeff just described, and summarizes the 5-year capital needs. The financing section, financing plan, provides the capital budget overview and revenue assumptions and displays summaries by project type and revenue source. And has a debt service schedule and operating and maintenance costs by spending category. The capital projects detail by priority and type section provides the project details and sorts projects by type, such as land acquisitions, new construction, station remodels and expansions, facilities replacement, repair and apparatus, PPE replacement and repair and special projects. And finally, the appendices includes things like the district's budgeting methodology, a budgeting calendar, guide to funds, glossary, board resolutions, and sources and uses of funds.
I apologize for that. So again, the project selection process, just want to give you an overview of what this year looked like. 49 projects, again, totaling 42 million. Again, we estimated in the budget that we'd have about 8 to 10 million to spend on this. So the prioritization was needed. It went through a 3-step process. First is strategic planning alignment. If the project submitted hits one or specifically more of those master plans I described earlier, we gave it a higher score. In some of these projects, they're hitting 2, 3, 4 of those categories. So they get elevated real quick. The second priority was regulatory compliance or reduction to operating expenses. Specifically, we have a lot of projects that are trying to resolve issues or matters of law, gender accommodations, ADA, and others. And then finally, if it's going to improve service delivery, obviously it's got to be a priority project. So that is the scoring mechanism. We then, as I mentioned, ranked the projects 1 from 49. That was done in the committee. And then project readiness obviously is a big part of that. Can we move tomorrow if it's funded, and make sure that we deliver that within the fiscal year or the planning period? And, you know, that's basically the recommendation to the fire chief and the deputy chiefs.
So here is the funding recommendations. As I said, there's 12 projects that were selected and totaling 9.1 million. There's your large dollar items I previously mentioned in the preliminary budget, of course, the 4.3 million of the type 1 replacements, the 9 ambulances, and then there's Copter 3 again. So in terms of the funding recommendations, funding sources, this slide is showing the same information in a slightly different way. You can see circled at the top there are the type 5 engines and the ambulances that make up about 75% of the capital plan.
Sorry, I missed it. Dave's going to punch me after this. I mixed up our notes, so now we're scrambling. So we just wanted to give you a look at the 5-year plan here and break them up in costs. Just want to make note here. it is $201.9 million in proposed projects looking out 5 years. That is a big number to think about. I do want to take a second here and address an issue that Director Wood had brought up in the Finance and Audit Committee, which is our increased reliance on debt service and the concern about that. I just want to make note, because I think it's worth talking about here, that it is a current concern of all of ours. Now that we have the data and we are looking at this pretty big mountain to climb, I just want to note, going back to the strategic plan, and specifically what the board had tasked me with was A, finding every revenue source we can. B, categorizing all of this need and looking out 5 years. And then C, presenting kind of what do we do to take care of this issue. So I'm standing here telling you that we have turned over every rock related to revenues. We're renegotiating leases. I think we have $60 million in grant asks out there. We are trying to talk federal, state, local government into every dollar we can find. We are updating our impact fees. There's just not a lot of blood in that turnip there. The next step, we have categorized this. So we spent a lot of time thinking about and talking about the use of debt service. And something for the board to think about and possibly discussion for the next strategic plan workshop is now some of these projects can't wait. I think we had some reasons to defer capital projects in the Great Recession and then in COVID as we were responding to the immediate need and service delivery. But some of these projects will need to be addressed. We thought, at least for the timing of this first year, after a lot of conversations with our consultants and where rates are right now, that it made sense in a very moderate amount to use them for some of these issues. But again, just keep that in the back of your mind, something to talk about later. That's why the decision weighs, and I just wanted to make sure we address it.
The funding recommendations for debt service are provided on this slide. Finally, this table shows that the debt service over the 5-year period for $40 million in projects selected in this year's plan includes everything that will be paid. The financing shown includes everything that will be paid over more than one fiscal year. And the board in its strategic plan directed vehicle procurements through financing, and the district has been procuring much of its fleet through that process. So finally, on our questions slide, before concluding, I just want to again recognize some staff who are not present here. Aaron's in the audience here. Recognize Aaron, but also Tara Mailer and Ron Empedrat, who worked closely on this project. Now, this is another item for the board, and another action item for the board. My recommendation is to adopt the resolution and implement that. Welcome to questions.
We have a question from Director Wood.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to say I know this is a huge thing, and I appreciate, Jeff, all the work you did to put this together. I know it's not like you're looking for things to do during your day, and this took a lot of it. And I just want to, I know it's a team plan, but I know without you and Aaron and all the hours that were added to your normal workloads, this wouldn't have got done. So thanks for all that time. Appreciate it.
Any other questions or comments? Go ahead, Director.
I'd also like to thank you for all the time and attention that went into preparing this. It's always challenging when you have more funding requests than funds available. But you mentioned, and I know it's got to be a priority when you're talking about the regulatory requirements like the OSHA mandated, for PPE, but I didn't, that was number 6, I think, on there, but I didn't see anything for SCBA's. Are we, not in need of replacing cylinders in this next fiscal year or anything of that nature?
Our AFG grant in 2017 is still current on SCBA's.
Perfect. Yeah, as long as we're not trying to replace them all at the same time. No interior firefighting for the next month. But
We have plans moving forward. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Okay, any other questions or comments on this item? Seeing none. I will entertain a motion in a second.
Madam Chair, I make a motion that we adopt staff's recommendation for the capital improvement program plan
I'll second it.
We do have a motion in a second. Madam Clerk, will you call the roll, please?
Director Gould,
Aye.
Orzali,
Aye.
Wood,
Aye.
Sheets,
Aye.
Kelly,
Aye.
Jones,
Aye.
White,
Aye.
Clark.
Aye.
And Sailors.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. The next item, number 4, has been removed from tonight's agenda. Moving on to item number 5, ratification of the resolution to extend teleconference of board meetings, Government Code 54953E-3. And what's been happening right now in the county, COVID continue, I'm sorry. Did I miss?
Yeah, you skipped 3.
Oh, I did.
Yes.
Thank you for bringing that to my attention. I was
Steve
so,
standing there patiently.
so eager to move on.
I just love
Let's move it on. All right, let's go back. Item number 3. Year-end 2021-22 budget amendment, CFO Dave Tool. I thought you were done. Let's go back and do number
Wishful
3.
thinking. Thank you again, Madam Chair and board members, Sawyer Chief Harms. This is an item without PowerPoints. Thank you. For this item, your approval is requested to shift 500,000 from the labor account to the service and supplies accounts. The amount requested is a portion of anticipated savings at the end of this fiscal year. The transfer funds would be used for higher anticipated fuel costs, 87,000 for that, increased utility costs, about 50,000 for that, and anticipated but not yet specified, just call inflation-driven price increases we're expecting this month, 363,000. Additionally, the agenda item seeks approval to transfer $57,600 from service and supplies to capital projects for an EMS training simulator equipment purchase, which incidentally was budgeted in the wrong account and should have been a capital project. This proposal does not increase the level of expenditures you last approved in the mid-year budget. It's just moving funds between accounts. And from a point of historical perspective, last year, the labor budget was low and a $1.9 million transfer was made from service and supplies to labor. This year, we're asking to go in the opposite direction, 500,000. This is an agenda item for action and staff's recommendations to approve the attached resolutions amending the fiscal year 21-22 general fund budget to reflect additional services and supplies expenditures and transferring funds to the capital facilities fund to facilitate a planned EMS equipment purchase.
Okay. Any questions, comments? Can I get a motion in a second?
Madam Chair, I move that we adopt resolutions amending the fiscal year 2021-22 general fund and capital facilities fund.
Second.
We have a motion in a second. Madam Clerk, will you call the roll, please?
Director Gould,
Aye.
Orzali,
Aye.
Wood,
Aye.
Sheets,
Aye.
Kelly,
Aye.
Jones,
Aye.
White,
Aye.
Clark.
Aye.
And Sailors.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Okay, let's go to item number 5 now. Ratification of resolution to extend teleconference of board meetings, Government Code 54953E-3. Because of what's happening with COVID up there, the trend is moving upward in the numbers of new cases. As of June 7th, there were 3,088 new cases in Sacramento County, with a 7-day average of 1,082. As of June 6th, there were 169 hospitalizations just in Sacramento County alone, with a 7-day average. With 20 of those patients in the ICU. Lastly, Sacramento County health officials advise all people to wear masks in indoor public places as the cases and hospitalizations increase around the region. So as COVID continues to stay with us, we are going to continue to offer Zoom meetings so that everyone has the choice to either come in, wear a mask, or join us on Zoom. Can I get a motion and a second to continue this item?
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Madam Clerk, will you call the roll, please?
Director Gould,
Aye.
Orzali,
Aye.
Wood,
Aye.
Sheets,
Aye.
Kelly,
Aye.
Jones,
Aye.
White,
Aye.
Clark,
Aye.
and Sailors.
Aye,
Motion passes.
thank you. Moving on, the next item is reports. President's report. I have none tonight. Next up, fire chief's report. What do
Good
we got
evening,
tonight?
directors and everybody here tonight. Thank you for the support. First off, for the 22-23 budget as we move forward. A couple of things. First off, congratulations to Joe Farica, who was promoted to Assistant Chief SIF Commander on Asia. His effective date was June 1st, so congratulations to Joe. Secondly, on a retirement, congratulations to Engineer Dave Carrillo on his retirement on June 2nd after 19 years of service. We have a couple open recruitments right now for the Special Operations Battalion Chief, a day assignment. Geographic Information Data Analyst is open, and we also have a firefighter paramedic internal and external process that is open right now. As Jeff said, is I think he said we had to turn over turnips, was it? Or search blood out of turnips, is that we've spent the last few weeks meeting with Citrus Heights Council members along with the Board of Supervisors as we updated our capital facilities or impact fee study and being able to move that forward. The relationships that we have with the supervisors on, I think it was Tuesday, they voted 5-0 to move our impact forward. There'll be another hearing, or that was the hearing. There'll be another vote in 2 weeks on that there. So again, the relationships are very strong there. At the end of the month, we will have the next meeting of the same night we have our meeting. Citrus Heights will have their meeting on our impact fees there also as we move forward. The other big item that is going on is, as you know, every year, twice a year, I try to meet with all the members. And usually it's in June and then another time in November. We call those the chief's forums. Myself and the deputies sit down. We're usually able to do those in about 18 meetings. So earlier this week, we started those. As always, we talk about the budget, the hiring, promotions, what's happening in the district as far as growth or as other questions from the members have. But one of the big items that we're talking a lot about this year are the 21 safer positions. So as you remember, in August of last year, we were awarded the grant for the 21 safer positions. It is unique that in the past, the safer would pay about 70%, and then the district would pay 30%, and then the next year it's 50-50, and then the final year they would have some percentage in there. These positions are 100% covered for all 3 years and gave us a lot of flexibility to look at our operation and be able to put those people into place. So we hired that group in February. They started the academy. They'll graduate at the end of the month. They'll do their 10 shifts and they'll count as staffing in August, then August 1st. So it's very important to have a plan together for being able to move forward. So in February, we asked John Runicki from the management side and Mike Gildone. I thought I saw Mike. Mike's in the back there hiding, but both John and Mike to in a labor management committee is to look through our organization, and the first priority was to be able to have a plan for the 21 safer positions, but also where do we want to be in 5 years? And so we knew we had really about 3 or 4 months. John and Mike did a great job of holding multiple meetings. They divided up the group, and if you remember, they came in and spoke to you all just quickly on really operations, EMS, and then a special operations group. And so they came back and last week they came in with a recommendation for the fire chief for moving forward. And when you look at it, some of the things they brought forward is if you look at 2021, we cracked over 100,000 calls and we're increasing call volume by about 5%. Fire calls over the last 2 years have jumped 22%, 10% increase in structure fires, and a 30% increase in vegetation fires. We've had 9 civilian deaths in the last 2 years, in 2019 and 2020. And we had a total of about $30 million in losses in 2020. So a very busy system for us that is out there, and a very active system on the EMS side of what we do every single day. So Mike and John came forward with 3 recommendations for looking at the service delivery side of it. Their first recommendation was to staff a full-time ambulance at Station 59. The second recommendation was add a fourth member to companies that had high call volume that also have a fire-based medic. And the last one is to add 3 positions to the air operations group out there. Myself and the executive staff have gone through those things. The first one, which was staffing the medic out at Station 59, has been a unique deployment for us for years. Is that Station 59 will get a call, there's 3 members out there, they have an engine, they have ambulances, they have a water tender, a brush truck, and every SWAT that's out there has something in it, and they take it. And rescue. Once they respond on a call, Station 58 then has to move up to be able to cover. 58, another company has to be able to move up and cover out there. Overall, the population has grown across the region, but out there in Rancho Marietta, it's been a population increase of 4.6%. Their call volume over the last few years has increased by 30%. Medic 59 now is averaging about 2.3, 2.5 calls a day or transports. So each time that happens, their average out of service time is 1 hour and 42 minutes. So you can see the impact that it's having on the system. So I think for all of us looking at that, that's a pretty easy opportunity to put an ambulance out there for service and being able to keep some of the other companies in position. One of our members that was in one of the chief's forums that's living out there, and Director White, I'm not real sure where they're going, but they said that they had just heard in a planning process that there's 700 new homes planned for that geographical area just over the short period of time here coming up. So we know that growth is going to happen out there with that. The second side of it is when we look at a fourth person on a company at the high volume stations, we're going to do 3 out of the 4 there. And there's a great advantage for the companies that go from 3 to 4. And if you look at the fire side of it, for the company officers, our folks do a great job. As a company officer, a lot of times they have to focus on what I would call the tactical level of seeing what is going on at the fire ground and giving direction. But it has to also be involved with the task level, making sure the hose line moves forward. By adding that fourth person, it gives them an opportunity to be able to look at the fire ground and then still have enough people. Allows them an opportunity in those busy stations with an ambulance to rotate people around. It gives them an opportunity to take people and do training, mentoring, allows someone that wants to take the engineer's exam to move up to a position and give some flexibility. I think the biggest thing that we have seen is that discussions with our members is just that there's so many stations that could benefit by a fourth person. And so this is just our snapshot right now for being able to do that. The last one that we're going to do, and we'll talk about the support of the air operations, and in the budget that just went through, we will support air operations, but we're going to support it in a different way. The last one we're going to do is we're going to look at a concept of putting a squad in place. And our concept of the squad is a 2-person vehicle. It will be staged at a location or be assigned to a location that has a high volume of calls. Fire stations, and for us here, if you take like Station 53 or Station 24, they will run 4,500 calls possibly in this next year. Ideally, companies, once they hit 3,500 calls, what you start to see is a decrease in opportunity. So the normal company goes to work, they check out their rig, they clean the fire station, they plan their day to be able to do training with their crews, be able to do PT, go out in their first due and prepare themselves for familiarization out there. Once you go over about 3,500 calls, what you start to see is things start to drop off. And so people get there and they check their rig, but they don't have time to clean the station because they are running calls and they want to be able to do a drill, but the call volume is so high is that they don't have that time, or they have to work with their battalion chief to be able to do it. So by putting a squad and looking at the deployment of the EMS side of it, it looks at how do we take and reduce that call volume then for those companies there. So can you reduce it where you have a squad and both of the companies are running 3,000 calls instead of one company running 4,500. The squad concept was something that Mike and John and the committee had brought forward as an opportunity, but at the time had looked at, where do we put it at? What's the equipment we're going to put them on? Some challenges. But I really think with the positions we have, this is a great opportunity to see what we can do as far as an impact on call volume. In my prior life in Phoenix, there's a fire station that has 2 engines in it. We added a 3rd engine and 2 ambulance, and all 3 of those companies are running over 4,000 calls. What you'll see is some of those first dues just have so many calls that there's an impact that you still are running it. But what you get out of it is that the companies around there then see a decrease in call volume. So I think if you take a station or like 24s and you put a squad there, it's an opportunity for us to run it as a pilot program and see what the impact is. Over the next 60 days, Chief Mitchell is sitting there in the front. Chief Mitchell, along with the input of labor and John Rudnicki, you need to come up with some guidelines for the squad that we will be able to work with our partners in the region here, and then being able to move forward and see what that impact is on those companies to truly reduce response time, reduce out of service time, reduce companies and from going from one first due to the next, but staying in their first due as they go forward there. So it is, to me, the pilot and the other options here are very exciting. The last one, just to talk about air operations, I think that the budget that you just approved, there is what I would say is the full load of what we would say as far as the overtime that is needed. There is a captain's position that's a program manager. There are just some other opportunities now that we have 3 aircrafts. And as you saw in the presentation, there's an opportunity for Copter 1, Copter 2, and now to upgrade Copter 3, that they're all 3 exactly the same. And what we'll get out of is how do we shut down the program in December, and then it's closed for about 4 months, and then we have to restart it back up again, is that we made stability through that program all the way through there and working with the group over there moving forward. So exciting times. We will have some goals that are laid out. We have obviously some challenges. Chief Wagman's going to find us a rig. He was texting me pictures of a possible rig earlier today, but I don't think it's going to work out. But we'll figure those things out and then really look out at like Station 59 and look at the impact of the additional folks on those companies that are really our busiest companies that we have in our system. So that ends my report for tonight, unless you have any questions for me.
Madam Chair, I have a question. Thanks, Chief, for all the numbers there on the SAFER grants. And Chief Mitchell, thank you for all that work. Do we have the 21 SAFER grants? That's how many we have?
Yeah, we have 21
spots?
positions.
Okay, could you tell me where those positions are actually going? You had 2 at Medic 59. We're going to upgrade from 3 to 4 on 3 engines.
Mhm.
And
One
how many
squad.
squads?
One squad with 2 people.
Okay, where are all the rest of the folks gonna be?
All 3 shifts, so 7 per shift. 7,
Yeah.
14,
Okay, so that
21.
adds it up. Thank you.
Mhm.
Does anyone else have any questions for the chief?
Just a comment that
Go ahead.
I appreciate the recognition of the significant residential developments in both the north and south side of the community out there. Plus, there's still homes being built outside the gate. I know there's growth throughout the district, but the consideration of staffing that ambulance full-time, I think, is something that I'm glad to see. I can't necessarily say proactive, but from a standards of cover perspective and the time on task, given their transportation distances, I really applaud the district's movement towards staffing that ambulance. So thanks.
All right, moving on to operations report. Good evening, DC Mitchell.
Madam Chair, good evening, directors, Chief Farms, and everybody here. Give you a few items here for the operations report. First off, we'll start off with the statistics. As we were talking about there, we ran a total of 4,279 total incidents since our last report, which is an average of over 305 calls per day. So still very busy out there, as we would expect. By incident type, 66% of those were EMS related, which is right on what we would expect to have at that percentage. I will say that there was 206 fire incident types that were responded to during that time, which averages about 14 fire incident types per day. So that's continuing to remain high. We expect to see that as we move into the wildland fire season here. As stuff dries out, things tend to burn more. So we are seeing that increase. Next, I just want to say thank you to a number of folks that recently put on our AutoX training out at the Zinfandel Training Center. You may have seen some of the coverage on the news. Firefighter Jason Watts, his cadre of highly qualified folks, as well as the training division, logistics, and many others, assisted to put on that multiple day training event out there. That's really, it's an advanced auto extrication, heavy wreckers involved. I don't know if you saw the car hanging off the building on the news, if you watched that segment. Fantastic job. They've done that for a few years. We're looking forward to the opportunities in the future to expand that out to more of our partners out there and what that brings, because it really is high quality training you don't see very often throughout the state. So thank you to them. In addition to that, our CERT members were out there for that whole entire class. We had 15 of them that were out there, and they put in a total of 168 hours, excuse me, of training, of support to that training. They were out there providing water and those kinds of things to our members. So thank you again to those CERT folks as well. We mentioned the academy coming to getting later and later here and getting closer to graduation. We have 37 recruits still out there. They're getting close. This is week 15 of 18. And appropriately, as I mentioned before, with the drying fuels, I was out there today. They were in their wildland gear doing make and break evolutions and extending progressive hose lays. Fortunately, came around the corner and they had a nozzle pointer right at me, but they were nice enough not to hit me in the windshield. But they're out there doing that. A couple of adjunct instructors that came in. Captain Aiello is out there and helping out because he's qualified to teach that. So again, thank you to those members that are getting our newer folks ready to go for the season ahead. And then also our training division, EMS division, and on-duty crews are facilitating our lateral firefighters from 21-2 through their 6-month probationary evaluation process, which is going very well. We're almost done with that. A couple of large incidents to highlight tonight. On the 1st of June, we had a number of companies respond to a structure fire up on Hoffman Lane in Orangevale. Very heavy fire conditions, some challenges there. It was hot. There was void spaces between a number of different roof types. It was a very challenging incident. The home did sustain significant fire damage, but 2 items of note for that as far as what the residents there gave us a lot of thanks for. One is there was a classic GTO vehicle that was in the garage, and we were able to get that out of there undamaged. It was uninsured, and so the homeowner was very appreciative of that. But also our crews went in after and did part of their salvage operations, and they were able to remove a number of the occupants' belongings, including some of the children's sports uniforms. And the kids started crying because it was something that was very special to them. So thank you to the crews out there for that great work. And then the second incident was on the 6th of June, in Nelda Lane. It was actually not in our district. It was in the Herald Fire District, which we provided automatic aid to. It was a 26-acre fire in the end. Structures were threatened and damaged. Our crews responded. We had the copter, dozer, both 358, water tender 58, 359 water tender, battalion 9, and AC 24 all responded there just due to the complexity of the incident and the growth. Herald Fire and Cal Fire were also there, so it was a very large response, as we would expect to see in those rural areas where the fires are starting to grow larger. But one of the notable items that we were able to do proactively was put a battalion chief and 5 engines heading them out to Slough House to stage, because it looked like that incident was going to grow and potentially have some more evacuations and things. Fortunately, they were able to get control of it, but we did have a full strike team ready to go to help our partners to the south. So very proud of our crews for being able to get to that very quickly and be ready to go when needed. So they did spend a lot of time out there doing mop up, obviously with all of that acreage burning and within the houses and the different fuel types. So very good job. We're in that season now. Our phones are going off a lot more with those vegetation fire incidents, as we would expect. We're hoping to keep them as small as possible through the season. So that's it for the ops report tonight, unless there's any questions.
Any questions? Thank you very much. Next up is firefighters local 522 reports. Matt Cole.
Good evening, board members and everybody in the room. First off, I'd like to congratulate Dave Carrillo on his retirement after 19 years of service and wish him well in his future endeavors. I'd also like to acknowledge the folks on the service delivery team. Mikey's in the room, but the other 35 plus people that have been working on that are not here. And they've been taking their own time. They've been all over the fire district. They've been at headquarters. They've been talking to division heads. They have really like turned over all kinds of stones to be able to provide this recommendation to the chief. And we're excited about the opportunities that this is going to present for us to continue to increase our service to the community. So thanks again to everybody. And I couldn't even stand here and list everybody, so I'm not going to try to. And that's not a completed mission. Like this is really just section one. Barbie, Chief Law, sorry, is in the room, and she was a key component of that, looking at our ambulance deployment. And everybody from Jeff Fry and Aaron just helping us understand the SAFER grant and really like the projections that are already in place. We couldn't reinvent the work that's already gone in there. Now we're not pretending to, but from our perspective, having the opportunity to look at this and give a recommendation was fantastic. So thank you to absolutely everybody. The last few months, we've been really busy out in the community, not just looking at what this delivery might look like, but also working with some of our community members specifically who support this training center opportunity that we have in front of us. Most recently, we've been really active with some of the primary elections coming up, making sure that those that support us in this, we support. And so I'm really happy where that stands. I can tell you, and I think I spoke to it with a number of folks, maybe in the last board meeting, my days all run together, but we stood and supported Local 2881. Their president, Tim, was very appreciative of that. Today, he wrote a letter saying that Cal firefighters absolutely support this opportunity, not just ours, but the city of Sacramento's ask as well. And that these two opportunities in the county will be great for Cal firefighters because they will come train with us as well. So mathematically, that gives us darn near a third of the firefighters in the state when you look at how many folks in 522 are also support this, as well as Local 55 and Alameda County. So that's really important to us. Like this is a huge benefit, not just to Metro Fire, but to so many folks. So to have that support lining up, it's fantastic. And so I think what that really speaks to is what's good for one is good for all in the fire service, and not just firefighters, but our community. And so the firefighters here, though we say a lot that we serve and protect the community, we're actually a part of the community and always have been ever since the first volunteer department way back when grabbed their buckets and ran down the street to help their neighbor. So we've been working tirelessly on things like the service delivery committee. We've been working on coming up with solutions to our staffing challenges. We've talked at length about all of the challenges the last 2 years have presented and how unique they are. But we have members running more calls than ever, facing new challenges that we've never faced before with a world that is unfortunately fairly violent at times. The mental health impact on our membership, like none of that is lost on us, I know. And we're all working together to come up with solutions. So to the 522 members in the room and on Zoom, we hear your frustrations, we see your fatigue. We as your labor reps, but also the board and management, like we are working to ensure that Metro Fire is the best place for you to call home. We hear you. And I want the representatives for the community in the room and those that may be on Zoom or maybe watch us later to know that we will always be here for our communities, no matter what challenges we face. We are 100% committed to that. And we thank you for the trust that you give us in that. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. Okay, next up is committee and delegate reports. For the executive committee, I have no report tonight. Communication Center JPA, DC Wagman. Thank you. California Fire and Rescue Training JPA, Chief Harms.
Our very last meeting will be June 22nd.
June 22nd. Finance and Audit Committee, Director Orzali.
The Finance and Audit Committee did not meet. Our next scheduled meeting is June 23rd. And that's completes my report.
Thank you. Policy Committee, Director Gould.
No report.
Thank you. Next up is board member questions and comments, and we shall start with Director Jones.
I'm always first up to bat.
I
No
know,
worries.
I know.
Hey, Madam Chair, I have no comments for tonight. I do want to thank everyone for all of the reports and great information about the SAFER grant deployments. I've been looking forward to seeing that finalized. So I guess I did have a couple comments.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Matt Kelly.
I just wanted to say happy Father's Day to all the fathers in the world. Hope you guys all enjoy a good weekend.
Thank you, Director Kelly. Director Sheets.
Evening. I just want to thank everyone for their reports, presentations tonight. Great information. I wanted to extend my gratitude to Station 106 for their hospitality last week. And I too wanted to wish all the fathers a happy Father's Day. That's all.
Thank you. Director Wood.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First off, I just want to comment, I'm really happy to hear that 59, that resolution looks like it's going to happen. That ever since my first ride along in the district was with BC Chris Seiler in 2013. And he pointed out the risks and the dangers that occur when that move up and you have the one person left behind in that station waiting for that move up. And it's always been a fear of mine. And what do you do? What's that firefighter going to do that's just sitting back in that station waiting when a call comes in, even though they're training and everything says you wait? These aren't the type of people that would wait. They're going to go in and put themselves at risk, even though they know better. So I'm glad to hear that we're taking care of that issue. And that's good to hear for the safety of our members. I also want to say thank you to everyone who was at 68. I appreciate the hospitality you guys extended my wife in my absence. I wasn't able to make it. I was out of town, unfortunately. So Aaron, thanks for all the hospitality you gave her and everyone else. So thank you.
Thank you. Director Ozali.
Very briefly, I just wanted to thank Mr. Fry and Mr. O'Toole for the work they've done on this capital improvements project. Great piece of work, definitely needed, and something we greatly appreciate.
Thank you. Director Gould.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Echo what Randy just said about the CIP. It's a wonderful document, lots of time and energy. So thank you to everyone that was involved in the leadership and the development of that plan. We look forward to sharing that with our partners in the community, even more than has already been done. Also like to see if there's an opportunity for board members to get access to the document that was provided relative to the service delivery update and recommendations. I, for one, would like to see those. And so if we can request that members get access to that of the board of directors. And then thank you very much. As a father, I look forward to copious amounts of gifts from all of my children. Thank you.
Thank you. Director White.
Well, I just want to, echo a lot of the sentiments that have already been said tonight about all the work and energy that's gone into the reports of the CIP and also the service delivery recommendations. Really appreciate everybody that is focusing on better service delivery and keeping the district running. And then I wanted to make mention that on May 28th, we lost a very big supporter of the fire service, a very unique individual, Randy Brink. He served as a equipment manager for the Fire Dogs for 20 years, and as well as numerous other capacities. He is somebody that absolutely loved Sacramento, and Sacramento loved him. And his memorial service will be held Tuesday, January 21st at River Cat Stadium, Sutter Health Park at 4 p.m.
At June?
No, this, June, whatever, we're in June.
You just said January.
So in June, Tuesday, June 21st at 4 p.m. So if we could have a moment of silence to go tonight, that'd be great.
That's very nice. Thank you. Thank you, Director White. Director Clark.
Yes, I'd like to thank everyone for their presentation and reports, and thank the men and women of Metro Fire for the job well done. That's all I have.
That's all you have.
Happy Father's Day. Everything else has been said. So.
Yes. And being last, I would just like to thank all the members for continuously showing up and serving this district, and this county of Sacramento and the small part of Placer County that we serve. And with that, we will go to closed session. And yeah, let's do the 1 minute, the moment of silence for Randy. Randy was a very special person. Thank you very much. Robert will. Also,
Okay.
Robert will report out.
I'll report out. Thank you, Director Sailors. The board met in closed session with agenda item number 1, conference with labor negotiator. No reportable action was taken. The board also met in closed session for conference with legal counsel for anticipated litigation. First, with respect to the Government Code Section 910 claim of Raed Sabah, the board voted unanimously to deny that claim. The board also met in closed session to consider the Government Code Section 910 claim of Victoria Kalish versus Metro Fire District. The board unanimously voted to deny that claim. The board met in closed session finally on item 2C, the Government Code Section 910 claim of Darlene Watson. The board voted unanimously to deny that claim. Item number 3, the board met in closed session for conference with legal counsel for existing litigation, Medic Ambulance Service, Inc. versus Sacramento Metropolitan Fire District. No reportable action was taken. And finally, with respect to item number 4, the board met in closed session for the public employee performance evaluation of fire chief. No reportable action was taken. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Council Lavra. This meeting is adjourned.